I will never forget the sound. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't the sharp crack of glass shattering against polished marble floors. It wasn't even the frantic echo of footsteps, employees scrambling, desperate to salvage whatever fragments of their careers they could still grasp. It was something far worse. It was the silence that came after. The kind of silence that doesn't settle, it devours. The kind that hollows out your chest, swallows entire empires, and leaves nothing behind but the ghost of what once stood there. I was standing at the center of the main office when everything began to collapse. The screens were still flickering numbers, projections, financial data bleeding into red, but I didn't need to read them to understand. I felt it. In the air. Metallic. Heavy. Poisoned with the scent of failure. Duarte Biotech. The name my family built over decades was being erased in real time. This can't be happening, someone whispered behind me. But it was... And I knew exactly when it had begun. Not today. Weeks ago. When a name started appearing in internal reports, like a phantom silent acquisitions, strategic absorption, control tightening piece by piece. I didn't know who he was yet, but I felt him. Like a presence. Like inevitability. Like the beginning of something that was never meant to be stopped. Then the first scream came. Then another. And another. Papers hit the ground. Phones rang endlessly, unanswered. Someone started crying. Another collapsed into a chair as if their bones had simply given up. The empire was dying, and everyone knew it. But nothing prepared me for seeing him. My father. The man who never failed. The man who built all of this with steady hands, cold decisions, and a mind that never hesitated, was sitting on the floor of his own office. Broken. His hands trembling. His eyes red. And for the first time in my entire life, I saw him cry. The sound was quiet, restrained, almost swallowed before it could fully exist. But to me, it was deafening. My heart didn't break in that moment. It hardened. Something inside me died with that company, and something far more dangerous took its place. Because in that exact moment, I understood one thing with brutal clarity. This wasn't an accident. This was done, planned, executed. And someone chose to destroy my family. And I was going to find out who, even if it destroyed me too. There is a kind of loss that makes no sound. It doesn't scream, it doesn't shatter, it doesn't announce its arrival with violence or spectacle. It simply empties everything. That's how the Duarte mansion died. No ceremony, no farewell, no dignity. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching strangers walk through the place I once called home as if it were nothing more than a temporary address. Men wearing gloves carried boxes, dismantling memories, labeling fragments of my life with cold, impersonal tags. Living room, office, private collection. As if it were that simple, as if meaning could be reduced to categories. Their footsteps echoed through the hollow corridors. Every movement stirred dust into the air, as though the house itself was being erased layer by layer. I could still smell it. Aged wood, polished surfaces, French perfume embedded into the curtains, and beneath it all, a faint trace of lavender. My mother's signature. For a moment, I almost saw her, standing at the end of the hallway, elegant, untouchable, smiling like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't collapsed. But it had. Miss will need you to clear the area. The man didn't even look at me when he said it. I didn't move, because leaving meant accepting it, and I wasn't ready to accept that everything was gone. I descended the staircase slowly. The sharp echo of my heels against marble sounded like a cruel reminder of who I used to be. Each step felt heavier, as if the house itself was pulling me back. Or maybe it was just my mind refusing to let go of what no longer existed. When I passed the main living room, I saw the piano. The same piano my mother used to play during quiet nights, while my father pretended not to listen, yet never once left the room. And now, it was being covered in plastic, sealed, like a body prepared for burial. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. Not in front of anyone. Because tears belong to people who still have something left to lose. And in that moment, I had nothing left. I walked out through the front doors without looking back. But just before crossing the gates, I stopped. The cold wind hit my face, carrying away the last trace of the house's scent. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something other than grief. Rage. Cold, focused, silent. Because this wasn't just bankruptcy. This wasn't misfortune. This was an execution. Meticulous. Personal. And someone was watching it happen. Maybe from the comfort of an untouchable office. Maybe smiling. Maybe waiting to see how far I would fall. I took a slow breath. And in that moment, I made a silent promise. If someone wanted to see me at the bottom, I would go there. But not to stay. To understand. And then, to destroy them in return. The sound of the hammer is different when it is your life being sold. It doesn't echo like wood striking wood. It lands like a verdict. Like a weapon. Like something sharp and final, driven straight through the center of your chest with ceremonial precision. Sold. The word spread across the room in a quiet ripple, refined and controlled, wrapped in the elegance of wealth, but beneath it, I could feel the violence of it. The ending of something sacred, reduced to a transaction. I sat in the last row. Not by choice, but because absence had already claimed the seats beside me. No one wanted proximity to ruin. The air in the auction hall was suffocating in its perfection, perfume layered upon perfume, expensive, curated, artificial. Notes of amber, jasmine, oud, all blending into something that should have been intoxicating, yet now only made it harder to breathe. It clung to my skin like a reminder of everything I had lost access to. Above, the chandeliers cast a cold, immaculate light over the room. No warmth, no softness. Every surface gleamed marble floors, polished wood, glass cases displaying fragments of my past like museum relics. Opulence, stripped of intimacy, transformed into spectacle. And in that room full of wealth, I had never felt poorer. I recognized them. Of course I did. The women seated in the front rows, draped in silk and diamonds, sipping quiet amusement behind perfectly trained smiles. The same women who once kissed my cheeks in greeting, who called my mother darling, who filled our home with laughter that now felt like a carefully rehearsed lie. Now, they didn't even look at me. Or worse, they did. Quick glances, sideways, predatory. The kind of gaze reserved for fallen things. There is a particular cruelty in high society. It does not scream. It does not insult openly. It simply erases you and watches to see if you disappear gracefully. I didn't. My eyes moved to the glass display as the next piece was presented. And the world narrowed. Lot 27. The auctioneer's voice was smooth, controlled, almost melodic, a man trained to detach emotion from meaning, to turn memory into currency without hesitation. A diamond necklace from the Duarte private collection. Exceptional clarity, timeless design, timeless. The word tasted like betrayal, because I knew that necklace. I knew it in ways no appraisal ever could. I remembered the way the diamonds used to catch candlelight, scattering fragments of brilliance across my mother's collarbone, the soft, delicate sound they made when she moved like whispered secrets brushing against one another, the way she would fasten it with steady hands, then glance at me through the mirror with that quiet, knowing smile. One day, this will be yours. Not anymore. Now it lay beneath sterile lighting, stripped of history, stripped of meaning, reduced to brilliance without soul. The diamonds still sparkled. But inside me, everything was dark. We'll begin at... The numbers started, rising quickly, effortlessly. Voices calling out increments like they were playing a game, like this was entertainment instead of desecration. Higher, confirmed, increase. Each bid was another cut, another fracture, another reminder that grief, when filtered through wealth, becomes a commodity. I felt their attention again, not direct. Never direct, but present, lingering. A pair of women leaned toward each other in the front row. One of them, someone who once spent entire summers in our house, whispered something behind a gloved hand. The other smiled, slowly, deliberately, the kind of smile that only exists in the presence of someone else's collapse. I held her gaze, unblinking, unmoved, and after a moment, she looked away, coward. Sold. The hammer fell. This time, I felt it. Physically. Like something inside my ribcage cracked under the impact. That necklace, the last piece of my mother that still belonged to me, was gone. Not lost. Not misplaced. Sold. My breath hitched just for a second. But I refused to break. Not here. Not for them. Because this entire room was waiting for it. Waiting for Isabella Duarte to shatter in public. To cry. To beg. To prove that the fall was complete. But they misunderstood something fundamental. I had already shattered. What remained was not fragile. I stood before the next item was announced. The movement was deliberate, controlled. My heels echoed across the marble floor, sharp and rhythmic, cutting through the low murmur of voices like a quiet rebellion. No one stopped me. No one called my name. As if I had already been erased from the narrative. As if Duarte was no longer a name worth acknowledging. The doors opened, and the rain met me without hesitation. Cold, relentless, real. For a moment, I stood there, just outside the threshold of that suffocating world of glass and gold, letting the water soak through my clothes, my hair, my skin, washing away the artificial scent of that room, the poison of their presence. I had no car waiting, no driver, no destination, only the storm and myself. The fabric of my dress clung to me, heavy, dragging. The cold bit deep, but I welcomed it. It was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything else. I could have called someone, but there was no one left to call. I lifted my chin, slowly, deliberately, rain streaming down my face, indistinguishable from tears I refused to shed. Because even stripped of everything, wealth, home, legacy, I still had one thing left, my dignity, and I would not let them auction that too. My hands curled at my sides as something inside me shifted, deep and irreversible. The grief was still there, the loss, the hollow ache, but beneath it, something darker was forming, something colder, something patient. Because what they took from me today was not just jewelry, not just wealth. It was memory, bloodline, identity. And anyone who dares to strip a person of that should fear what rises in its place. I stepped into the rain, penniless, alone, but unbroken. And for the first time since the fall began, I did not feel like prey. I felt like something else entirely. Something that learns. Something that waits. Something that eventually hunts. Silence in this place is not peace. It is pressure. It presses against the walls, against my lungs, against the fragile edges of what is left of me, as if the apartment itself is slowly collapsing inward, not physically, but existentially reducing everything to something smaller, colder, less human. This place is not a home. It is what remains after one is stripped of the right to have one. The walls are thin, stained with the quiet decay of years I do not belong to. The air smells of dust, damp plaster, and something faintly metallic like old pipes rusting behind unseen surfaces. Every breath tastes wrong. Every inhale feels borrowed. The lamp in the corner flickers intermittently, its weak, yellow light barely strong enough to hold back the darkness gathering in the edges of the room. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the floor, shifting with each movement of the curtain that never fully rests. The window doesn't close. I tried, twice. But the frame is warped, and the lock refuses to align, so the wind slips through in thin, persistent whistles, threading itself into the room like something alive, something that watches, that listens, that reminds me with every passing second that I no longer exist in comfort, that I no longer exist in control. I haven't slept. I won't, because sleep invites weakness, and weakness is something I have already been punished for. I sit on the floor, surrounded by debris, not trash. Evidence. Documents spill out from open boxes, financial statements, corporate filings, printed articles, fragments of a life dissected and reassembled in desperation. Sheets of paper cover the cold floor in uneven layers, like the aftermath of something violently dismantled. My hands move constantly, sorting, aligning, rearranging, searching for patterns that refuse to stay hidden the longer I stare. At the center of it all is him, Arthur Vance. The name settles into my mind like something cursed, heavy, inevitable. Unavoidable. I see his face again on the screen, on the printed articles, in grainy photos taken at corporate events, charity galas, closed-door meetings no one was supposed to photograph. His image repeats, over and over, from different angles, different years, yet always the same. Controlled. Composed. Untouched. There is something profoundly disturbing about the consistency of him. Time moves. People change. Empires rise and fall. But Arthur Vance remains, like a fixed point in a collapsing universe. His eyes are the worst part. Even through paper, even through pixels, they feel wrong. Not empty, not hollow, but aware, too aware. As if they are not being observed, but observing back. As if the moment I look at him, he already knows. I drag one document closer, then another. Dates begin to align. Numbers. Transactions hidden beneath layers of legality, so intricate they almost appear clean. Almost, but not quite. I follow the trail, slowly at first, then faster, then obsessively, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't opportunistic. It wasn't luck. It was meticulous. Years of positioning. Years of acquisition through proxies, through shells, through invisible hands that never left fingerprints. Companies appearing, disappearing, merging, dissolving, all orbiting the same silent center. Him. Always him. This was not a takeover. This was cultivation. He didn't attack Duarte Biotech. He grew around it, like something parasitic, something patient, something that waits until the host is too entangled to survive the extraction. And then, he pulled. My stomach tightens. Not with fear, but with recognition. Because this is not business. This is predation. I let out a slow breath, but it doesn't steady me. My body is exhausted, aching, heavy, fragile in ways I refuse to acknowledge. My eyes burn. My muscles protest every slight movement. But my mind is awake in a way it has never been before. Sharp, focused, dangerous. I pick up one of the printed photos again. His face. His expression. Unchanged, untouched. As if the destruction of lives exists outside his moral framework. As if it is simply necessary. My fingers tighten around the paper until it bends. The sound is soft, but satisfying. Still not enough. Nothing will be enough. The realization settles slowly, not as panic, but as certainty. My father. The investigation. The looming prison sentence. There is no separation. No alternative path. No hidden solution waiting to be discovered. Everything leads to one place. Arthur Vance. I lean back slightly, staring at the ceiling where shadows shift like something alive above me. The wind pushes through the broken window again, colder this time, sharper, almost intrusive. And suddenly, the truth becomes unbearable in its simplicity. If I want to save him, if I want to stop this, I have to go to him, not as an equal, not as a negotiator, but as something else entirely. The thought should terrify me. It does. But it also does something worse. It makes sense. Because predators do not respond to distance. They respond to proximity. I close the laptop slowly. The click echoes in the room like the sealing of a decision I cannot undo. My reflection flickers briefly on the dark screen. I barely recognize it. Not because I am broken, but because I am becoming something else. Something shaped by loss, by humiliation, by the quiet, relentless growth of vengeance. I whisper his name, not softly, not fearfully, but like an invocation. Arthur Vance. The room feels colder after that, as if even the walls understand what that name carries. And in that moment, I stop being the woman who lost everything, and become the one who is willing to walk directly into the mouth of the predator, just to see if it can bleed. I didn't walk toward the tower like someone searching for answers. I walked like something drawn inevitably, unwillingly into the gravitational field of a force too large to ignore, too dangerous to misunderstand, too deliberate to be called coincidence. Manhattan stretched around me in all its brutal indifference, alive in that mechanical, relentless rhythm that does not pause for grief, does not soften for loss, does not even register collapse unless it disrupts profit margins. The wind cut between the buildings like a blade, thin and precise, slipping through the seams of my coat as if it had been designed specifically to remind me that I no longer belonged to the insulated world I once moved through so effortlessly. My steps echoed faintly against the pavement, swallowed almost instantly by the city's constant motion heels, engines, distant horns, voices layered into a single continuous sound that made every individual existence feel temporary, replaceable, irrelevant. I passed storefronts I used to know intimately, glass facades displaying curated perfection, handbags resting like artifacts, watches suspended in light as if time itself obeyed them, dresses draped over mannequins with a kind of quiet arrogance. I used to walk into these places without hesitation, without thought, because the world behind those doors recognized my name before I even spoke it. Now I passed by as a reflection. Just another silhouette moving across the surface, unacknowledged, uninvited, unseen. The contrast was almost surgical in its precision. Then, I moved through those spaces like someone who owned them. Now, I was invisible among those who still believed they did. There is something uniquely disorienting about becoming insignificant in a place that once revolved around your presence. It strips you not only of status, but of orientation. You begin to question whether the past was ever real at all, or merely a carefully constructed illusion that someone else decided to dismantle when it became inconvenient. Arthur Vance. The name threaded through my thoughts with quiet persistence, each repetition sharpening rather than dulling its impact. I had seen the patterns, understood the structure, recognized the meticulous, almost artistic way he had dismantled my family piece by piece, not with brute force, but with patience, the kind of patience that belongs not to men, but to predators that understand time as a weapon. And now, I was walking toward him. Not to confront, not yet, but to see. To understand the architecture of the thing that had devoured my life. The tower revealed itself gradually, as if it had been waiting for the correct angle of approach to fully assert its dominance. First, the reflection, its glass surface catching fragments of sky and surrounding structures, distorting them into something colder, more controlled. Then the full structure emerged, rising vertically with a precision that felt almost unnatural. It did not blend into the skyline. It imposed itself upon it. The Vance Tower was not designed for people. It was designed for power. Glass and steel arranged with such ruthless intentionality that it felt less like architecture and more like a declaration. There was no softness in its lines, no concession to comfort, no invitation to belong. It stood like a monument to something beyond human scale, something that did not need approval, did not require understanding, did not tolerate weakness. I stopped across the street and looked up. That was my first mistake, because looking up at it felt like submission. The height forced the body into a posture it instinctively resists, the neck strained, the chest exposed, the gaze lifted towards something that dwarfs you so completely that resistance begins to feel irrational. It was the kind of structure that turned people into measurements, small, temporary, inconsequential. Gods build temples to be worshipped. Men like Arthur Vance build towers to remind the world, who no longer needs to ask for belief. The glass reflected nothing human. Only sky, only light. Only distance. The entrance below was immaculate. Dark glass doors, polished stone, security positioned with calculated subtlety, the kind of presence that does not need to assert itself because it already controls everything within reach. They were not guards. They were extensions of him. The wind shifted again, sharper this time, pulling at my coat, threading cold through my spine. The city noise dulled, not because it disappeared, but because my focus narrowed so completely that everything else became irrelevant. Then the car arrived. Black. Flawless. A Maybach, or perhaps a Rolls-Royce. Something engineered not for transportation, but for dominance. It moved differently from the rest of the traffic, gliding rather than driving, as if friction itself had been negotiated away in its design. It stopped at the entrance with quiet authority. Everything in me stilled. A door opened, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. I did not see his face. Not clearly. What I saw was worse. A silhouette unfolding from darkness with controlled precision. A man who did not rush, because nothing in his existence required urgency. His movement was minimal, economical, every gesture stripped of excess, as if even motion itself obeyed discipline in his presence. His hand emerged first. Steady. Deliberate. The cuff of a dark coat shifting slightly as he adjusted it, revealing the brief, cold glint of an expensive watch, metal catching light in a way that felt less like decoration and more like a statement. Time controlled, measured, owned. Then the rest of him followed. Height, structure, presence. Not loud, not exaggerated, but absolute. The kind of presence that does not demand attention because it alters the environment so completely that attention becomes unavoidable. Security closed around him, not protectively, but structurally, like walls forming around something that does not fear intrusion because it already anticipates it. And I stood there, frozen, my heart accelerating in a rhythm that felt violent, unfamiliar, almost invasive. It wasn't just fear. Fear is simpler, cleaner. This was something layered, something tangled, my body responding before my mind could impose order. Hatred came first. Sharp, immediate, pure. This man, this presence, this calculated force of destruction, was the axis around which my ruin had been constructed. Everything I had lost traced back to him with terrifying precision. I should have felt only that. Only rage. Only the desire to see him fall. But beneath it, something else moved. Something darker. Something I refused to name, because it felt too close to recognition. Not admiration. Never admiration. But awareness. The kind of awareness prey feels when it finally sees the predator not as an abstract threat, but as a living force, real, present, undeniable. There is a moment in that recognition where fear does not repel, it binds, where the mind, instead of turning away, studies, measures, tries to understand the shape of the thing that might end it. My skin reacted before my thoughts did. A cold tension spreading across my shoulders, a subtle tightening in my chest, a breath that didn't fully release, and beneath all of it, a pull, unwanted, unwelcome, unforgivable, because power in its rawest form does not ask to be admired. It imposes itself, and something in me, something buried beneath grief, beneath anger, beneath everything I thought defined me, recognized it, hated it, and in the same breath, refused to look away. He disappeared into the building without ever acknowledging the world outside it. The glass doors closed behind him with quiet finality, like a boundary sealing itself. And just like that, he was gone. But the impact remained. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough for the cold to settle deeper into my bones. Long enough for the reality to crystallize into something undeniable. This was not a man you approached lightly. This was not a situation you navigated safely. This was a descent. And if I chose to take the next step, I would not be walking into a building. I would be walking into the mouth of something that had already proven it knew exactly how to destroy me. And yet, I didn't step back, because somewhere between fear and fury, I had already made the decision. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. Places meant to heal have a peculiar way of revealing how much has already been lost. The clinic was too quiet when I walked in, quiet in a way that did not comfort, but suffocated. The air carried the sterile sharpness of antiseptic, a scent so clean it felt violent, as if it existed to erase not only bacteria, but memory itself. White walls, white floors, white light, everything reduced to a controlled, lifeless neutrality. A sanctuary, in theory, but in reality, a waiting room for deterioration. I paused outside his door longer than I should have, because part of me knew the man inside would not be the one I remembered. When I stepped in, the sound reached me first. That steady, mechanical rhythm. A machine keeping count of something fragile, something fading. My father looked smaller. Not just thinner, reduced. As if something fundamental had been stripped from him, leaving behind only the outline of who he used to be. The strength that once defined him commanding, immovable, absolute, had been replaced by something fragile, something quietly collapsing under the weight of consequences he could no longer control. For a moment, I stood there, unable to move. This was not the man who built Duarte Biotech. This was not the man who filled rooms with presence alone. This was a man deteriorating. And the realization hit with a force I wasn't prepared for. Time was no longer something we had. His eyes found mine eventually, and something inside them broke further when he recognized me. Isabella. My name sounded unfamiliar in his voice, fragile, like it didn't belong in the same space as weakness. I crossed the room slowly and sat beside him. The chair scraped softly against the floor. The sound felt intrusive, like I had disrupted something sacred or something already beyond saving. His hand shifted slightly on the sheets, as if he intended to reach for me, but didn't trust his own strength to complete the gesture. I took it anyway. It was cold, lighter than I remembered. human in a way that frightened me. I'm sorry. The words came without hesitation, without defense, without the pride that once made him unshakable, and somehow that made them worse. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could hold it together long enough to... His voice faltered. His breath hitched. The machine responded with a sharper rhythm for a moment before stabilizing again. I tightened my grip on his hand. Don't. It came out softer than I intended, because if he kept speaking, I might break. And I couldn't afford that. Not now. Not when everything was already slipping beyond control. He turned his head slightly, staring at the ceiling instead of me. I should have seen it, he whispered. I should have known someone like him doesn't move without purpose. Someone like him. He didn't say the name. He didn't need to. Arthur Vance was already in the room, even in absence. I destroyed us, Isabella. No, you didn't. But I didn't say it, because the truth was more complicated than comfort allowed. Instead, I leaned closer, lowering my voice, not for him, but for myself. I'm going to fix it. He let out a weak breath that might have been a laugh or disbelief. There's nothing left to fix. There was, but it wasn't something he could imagine. Not something he would accept. And definitely not something I could explain. So I said nothing more, because some promises are not meant to be spoken. They are meant to be carried and paid for later. I left before the silence between us could turn into something unbearable. The hallway felt colder, longer, as if the distance between that room and the exit had stretched in response to what I now knew. My phone rang before I reached the doors. The name on the screen didn't surprise me, but something inside me still tightened. I answered. Miss Duarte. The lawyer's voice was controlled, professional, detached in the way only someone accustomed to delivering damage can be. The situation has escalated. Each word landed with deliberate weight. The charges have accelerated beyond our projections. The opposing side has influence, significant influence. Of course they did. What does that mean? I already knew, but hearing it would make it real. It means we've run out of time. A pause, measured, controlled. There is a high probability that an arrest order will be issued within the next 48 hours. 48 hours. Not days. Not weeks. Hours. The word didn't echo. It collapsed inward, like something folding into itself under unbearable pressure. There are no remaining legal avenues, none that would be effective in the time frame we're dealing with. Another pause. Then, softer. I'm sorry. The call ended. And with it, the illusion of options. I stood there, just outside the clinic, the city moving around me as if nothing had changed. Cars passed. People walked, conversations continued, but something fundamental had shifted. The path had narrowed, until there was only one direction left. I walked without thinking, through streets I didn't register, past faces I didn't see, until I found myself back in the apartment. Dark, cold, silent. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't move for a long time, just stood there, letting the weight settle fully. This was it. No resources, no allies. No leverage. Except one. Me. The realization didn't come as panic. It came as clarity. Sharp. Inevitable. Final. I reached into my coat slowly and pulled out the card. Black. Minimal. Unforgiving. Vance Tower. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough for the meaning to settle into something irreversible. This wasn't an invitation. It was a threshold. A line between what I had been and what I would have to become. Because saving my father would not be negotiation. It would be surrender of a different kind. Calculated, deliberate, predatory, in its own way. I closed my hand around the card, and for the first time since everything began, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth in its entirety. I was about to step into the fire, not because I believed I could survive it, but because letting him burn alone was not an option. And some people do not run from the flames. They walk into them willingly. Because they understand something fundamental about sacrifice. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to fall. There are decisions that feel heroic when imagined from a distance, and then there are decisions like this one small in appearance, almost absurd in their simplicity, yet so spiritually violent that the body resists them before the mind can even begin to pretend it is ready. All I had to do was make a phone call, a number, a voice, a request, nothing more. And yet I sat on the floor of that freezing apartment, as if I were preparing to place my hand willingly into the mouth of something ancient and carnivorous, something patient enough to let me choose the moment of my own surrender. The lamp beside the mattress flickered again, its weak light shivering across the room, catching the edges of cardboard boxes, unpaid notices, scattered documents, the exhausted debris of a life dismantled with exquisite precision. The business card rested in my hand like a blade, black, immaculate, minimal, almost elegant in its cruelty. Vance Tower. Executive office. There was no warmth in its design, no invitation, no false charm. It did not ask to be used. It expected obedience. Even now, holding it between trembling fingers, I could feel the insult embedded in it, not because the card itself was offensive, but because it represented the final architecture of my humiliation. To call that number was to acknowledge what the world had already begun whispering around me, that Isabella Duarte, daughter of a fallen empire, had been reduced to asking for access. I stared at the numbers for so long they stopped looking real. My thumb hovered over the screen, motionless. My pulse beat visibly in my wrist. I could hear the wind forcing itself through the warped window frame, hear the faint rattle of glass, the dull ticking of the cheap clock on the wall, counting down the remains of whatever dignity I still possessed. Somewhere beneath the cold, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the rage that had been keeping me upright for days, there was something uglier than fear. Pride. Injured, furious, suffocating pride. It rose in me like a last animal instinct, one final refusal to kneel. Don't call. Don't give him this. Don't let his gatekeepers hear your voice and measure your desperation. Don't let them place you on hold like any other petitioner begging outside a locked cathedral. But then I saw my father again, not as memory, but as he had looked that afternoon, diminished under fluorescent light, skin turned fragile by stress and shame, his apology lodged in my chest like shattered glass. 48 hours. That was the clock now. Not metaphorical, not emotional, real, brutal, legal. Every second I delayed became something I could someday have to explain to myself if he was taken away in handcuffs. Pride is a luxury for people who still have alternatives. I no longer did. I inhaled slowly, then again, then once more, deeper this time until the breath hurt. I straightened my spine even though no one could see me. Ridiculous, maybe, but necessary. If I was going to crawl, then I would do it with my head high. I keyed in the number and stared at the screen before pressing call, as if there might still be some invisible mercy capable of intervening in the final second. There wasn't. I pressed it. The ring began. One tone. Clean. Corporate. Remote. Another. Too long. Then another. By the fourth ring, my entire body was listening. My shoulders had gone rigid. My fingers were cold around the phone, yet my palm had begun to sweat. Adrenaline moved through me in thin, electric currents. I hated that. Hated that a receptionist's silence could do this to me. Hated even more that I understood with visceral clarity that this was part of the design. Power rarely presents itself at the top first. It teaches submission at the edges, through lobbies and locked doors and women with impeccable diction whose true function is not administration, but filtration, gatekeepers, priests of access, human architecture built to remind the rest of the world that proximity must be earned. Then she answered. Executive office. Her voice was not merely professional, it was glacial. Smooth, efficient, almost weightless, yet sharpened by the kind of cultivated superiority that comes from speaking on behalf of a man the world has already agreed to orbit. She did not greet me. She did not ask how she could help. She simply opened the line as one opens a blade. For half a second, no sound came out of me. I despised myself for that silence immediately. I need to schedule a meeting with Mr. Vance. My own voice sounded too human, too exposed. There was a pause so brief it might have meant nothing to anyone else. To me, it was a diagnostic scan. In that tiny silence, I could almost hear her assessing the fabric of my phrasing, the background noise, the strain under the calm, the class position, the likelihood of relevance. When she spoke again, her tone had changed by less than a degree, but I still heard the mild dismissal of someone accustomed to deciding who matters before they finish speaking. May I ask the nature of your business with Mr. Vance? Not what is this regarding, not how may I direct your request. The question was not informational, it was territorial, a warning dressed as protocol. She was telling me, with perfect courtesy, that I did not yet have the right to ask for him directly. I swallowed. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. This was the moment my pride wanted me to retreat, to end the call before the humiliation could deepen. Instead, I did the only thing I had left. I used my old voice. The Duarte voice. The one I had learned in hallways where people moved aside before I reached them. The one polished at galas, in boardrooms, at tables where money did not need to be named because everyone present already possessed it. Cool, precise, entitled without effort. Tell him Isabella Duarte is calling. I let the name settle, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough. A surname once capable of opening rooms. A surname now half buried, but not yet erased. This time the silence on the other end lasted longer. And that, somehow, was worse. I pictured her sitting in some immaculate office high above the city, headset discreet, posture perfect, expression unreadable. I imagined her recognizing the name, not because she respected it, but because she understood what its collapse had cost the financial pages, the legal columns, the whisper networks of elite Manhattan. Duarte, fallen, distressed, finished. The kind of name people pronounce carefully because ruin, when expensive enough, retains a perverse glamour. One moment. Then a click. Old music bloomed into my ear. It was piano at first, soft, minimal, pristine. The sort of music meant to calm, designed by someone who understood that the wealthy dislike being reminded they are waiting. But there was something unbearable about it in that moment, something haunting, mocking. Every polished note felt like a smile held too long. As if the line itself were saying, "You see, even your desperation must be elegantly managed here." I lowered the phone slightly but did not take it from my ear. The apartment seemed to recede around me. The lamp hummed. The wind kept needling the window. Somewhere water dripped in the old pipes. My mind moved ahead of me, viciously, helplessly, toward the meeting I had not yet secured. What would I say when I stood in front of him? Would I beg? No. The thought alone made my stomach turn. Would I threaten him? With what? My grief. My father's deteriorating health? The ashes of a company he had already dismantled? Would I tell him I knew what he had done, that I had traced the elegant brutality of his strategy through shell companies and delayed acquisitions and carefully engineered pressure points? Would he care? Or worse, would he be pleased that I had finally understood the artistry of my own destruction? The music continued, measured, refined, suffocating. I thought of his tower, the glass, the car, the silhouette, the watch flashing cold at his wrist. Power has texture when seen up close. It is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply the certainty that everyone else will wait. I looked at the black card beside me on the floor and understood that I was no longer calling a man. I was calling a system arranged around him, a predatory ecosystem in which every receptionist, every elevator, every polished stone surface existed to remind visitors that they were entering not a business, but a hierarchy. Then the line returned. Miss Duarte. Even hearing my name spoken back to me in that voice felt like an evaluation. Mr. Vance can make 10 minutes available tomorrow, 11:40 a.m. 10 minutes. That was all. Not a meeting, not a conversation, a ration. A measured slice of his time, dispensed like medicine or punishment. My fate, my father's fate, compressed into the space between two appointments. I should have felt insulted. I did. But beneath the humiliation came something harsher. Relief so sharp it was almost nausea. "I'll be there," I said. "You will report to the executive lobby 15 minutes early. Late arrivals will not be accommodated." Of course they wouldn't. Understood. "Good evening, Miss Duarte." The line went dead. That was it. No ceremony, no transition, just absence. I lowered the phone slowly and stared at the darkened screen until my own reflection emerged, warped and dim. For a long moment I did not move. The room had become impossibly quiet again, but the silence was different now, heavier, denser, almost contractual. Before the call, the apartment had felt like a ruin. After the call, it felt like a witness. Tomorrow, 11:40, 10 minutes. I repeated the numbers in my head the way prisoners memorize keys, routes, last chances. Time had narrowed again. My life had been collapsing for days in broad, operatic strokes. Now it had condensed into something far more terrifying. Precision, a clock, a slot, a door that would open and close on someone else's schedule. I placed the phone beside me and pressed the heel of my hand against my mouth, not to stifle tears, had none left for this, but to contain the tremor moving through me. Adrenaline still burned beneath my skin. So did humiliation. So did resolve. Because no matter how cold the secretary had sounded, no matter how efficiently she had reduced me to a request, and then to an allotted segment of time, the truth remained. I had done it. I had crossed the first threshold. Pride had not saved me. Necessity had moved me instead. And necessity, once accepted, becomes a terrifying kind of freedom. I looked around the room. The boxes, the papers, the flickering lamp, the shadows. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Tomorrow I would walk into Arthur Vance's world, not as a spectator, not as a name in decline, but as a woman who had finally agreed to stand directly before the machinery that had devoured her life. And as the silence thickened around me, I understood that the worst part was not the waiting anymore. It was knowing the door had opened, and that I had chosen, with my own hand, to step through it. There are nights that do not belong to sleep, nights that arrive like a threshold, thin and trembling, separating one life from the next so cleanly that by the time dawn comes, the woman who entered them no longer exists in the same form. That night was one of them. It did not feel like the eve of a meeting. It felt like the eve of an execution, except I had not yet decided whether I would be the sacrifice or the blade. The apartment was almost completely silent when I locked the door behind me. Even the wind at the ill-fitted window seemed more restrained, as if the room itself understood that something ceremonial was about to happen. The dim light from the bathroom bled weakly into the darkness of the bedroom, illuminating the edges of boxes, the thin mattress, the remains of the version of me that had spent the last week surviving instead of choosing. I stood there for a long moment without moving, my hand still on the door, my pulse uneven, my thoughts too sharp to allow collapse. Tomorrow had a time now, a floor, an office, a man, and because of that, this night demanded an answer from me. Would I walk into Arthur Vance's tower as what I had become through grief, or as something forged from it? I turned on the bathroom light and the bulb buzzed faintly before settling into a pale, sickly glow. The bathtub was old, enamel chipped near the drain, the metal fixtures dulled with age, but when I twisted the handle and water began to pour, I watched it as if it were the beginning of a rite. I waited until the tub had filled enough, then undressed slowly, each movement feeling less practical than symbolic, as though I were peeling away evidence. The sweater that had smelled of rain and stale city air, the blouse that carried traces of cheap detergent, cardboard dust, exhaustion, the underclothes that clung to me like the residue of sleepless nights. On the floor, the pile of fabric looked less like clothing than like the discarded skin of a creature too battered to keep pretending it was whole. I stepped into the water and the cold shocked the breath from my body. It was not gentle, not cleansing in the tender way people imagine water to be. It was honest. It wrapped around my ankles, my calves, my thighs, then rose to claim the rest of me with an intimacy so severe it felt almost punitive. I sank into it slowly, arms folding over myself for an instant before I forced them open again. No, not tonight. Tonight there would be no shrinking. The water reached my waist, my ribs, my shoulders, and every inch of it mirrored exactly what had been living inside me for days. Cold, unsentimental, impossible to negotiate with. I leaned back and let my head rest against the porcelain edge, closing my eyes as droplets ran down my temples into my hairline. My breathing slowed. Around me, the bathroom held its own small, pitiful echoes, water shifting, pipes groaning, the distant whistle of the window in the next room. I lifted my hands and ran them over my skin, over the tension in my neck, over my collarbones, my arms, my stomach, not with vanity but with something closer to inventory. This body had carried humiliation. This body had sat in auction rooms and hospital chairs. This body had walked through Manhattan in borrowed anonymity and stood in the shadow of Arthur Vance's tower trying not to tremble. This body had not failed me, but it had begun to smell like survival, like fear sweated into cheap fabric, like rain-damp walls, like the sour metallic edge of sleeplessness. Poverty has a scent. So does despair. They sink into cloth, into hair, into the pores, until you begin to feel as if deprivation itself has learned the architecture of your flesh. I reached for the soap. It was plain, almost scentless, but in that moment its lather felt luxurious because it obeyed my hands. I scrubbed harder than necessary, over my wrists, my throat, the center of my chest, along my legs, over my skin until it flushed, as if friction alone could erase the last few weeks. Not just the physical residue of them, but the weakness, the tears, the begging silence I had endured in private. I washed as though trying to remove an old self that had become too cracked to inhabit. The girl who still believed things could be repaired through logic. The daughter who thought a family name could protect her. The woman who mistook endurance for control. I let the water slide over me and imagined it taking all of her with it, carrying her down the drain in thin, invisible spirals. No tears came. That surprised me. I had expected some final collapse, some trembling cinematic grief in the bathtub while the city slept outside, but whatever part of me used to cry had retreated too far inward to be reached. In its place there was only a hard, lucid stillness. A metamorphosis never looks graceful from the inside. It is damp, lonely, sacrificial. It feels like being split open without witnesses. Yet, when I sat up and let the water spill from my skin in silver lines, I knew something had shifted. Not healed, not softened, sharpened. I dried myself slowly, pressing the thin towel against my arms and shoulders until the cold retreated from the surface of my body, though not from the place beneath my ribs where tomorrow had already lodged itself like a blade. Then I crossed into the bedroom and knelt beside the smallest of the remaining boxes. I knew what was inside before I touched it. I had avoided it for weeks, not because I forgot, but because I remembered too well. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue that had yellowed at the corners, lay the dress. Dark crimson. Not bright. Not girlish. Not festive. The color of old roses kept too long in a locked room. The color of velvet curtains in private salons. The color of blood after it deepens, after it leaves the body and becomes evidence. I lifted it carefully, and even before the fabric fully unfolded, memory moved through me with enough force to make my hands pause. Silk. Dense. Cool. Fluid. It slipped over my fingers like something alive, like water that had learned discipline. Along the bodice, there were panels of lace so fine they looked almost like a secret rather than a design, delicate enough to suggest fragility, deliberate enough to weaponize it. This had once belonged to another life, the one in which choosing a dress meant choosing an impression, an entrance, a mood. Now it felt like a relic recovered from a tomb. For a moment, I simply held it against myself and stood there barefoot in the weak light, letting the weight of it settle into my palms. This was the last true piece of my old world that had survived untouched. The final luxurious thing no one had taken, sold, boxed, or stripped away. Maybe because it had been hidden too well. Maybe because fate wanted to leave me one artifact with which to enter the next act of my ruin. I almost laughed at that. Then I put it on. The silk slid over my skin with a terrible intimacy. Cool first, almost cold, then gradually warming where my body claimed it. The dress clung in all the right places, not softly, but knowingly, as if it remembered me better than I remembered myself. It molded to my waist, my hips, my back. It traced every line without apology. The lace sat against my collarbones and arms like ornamented restraint, elegant enough to distract from the fact that it felt, unmistakably, like preparation for battle. Not armor in the crude masculine sense of steel and force. Something more dangerous, something sacrificial, something designed to make a monster hesitate for 1 second too long before deciding whether he was looking at prey or a queen. Crimson armor. That was what it became the instant it settled against me. I stood before the mirror and stared. The glass was imperfect, slightly warped at the edges, but perhaps that made it truer. Beauty was not what it offered me. It offered revelation. My hair, still damp, fell dark around my shoulders. My skin looked pale against the deep red of the silk, almost luminous in contrast. My face was sharper than I remembered, cheekbones more pronounced, mouth more severe, eyes darker from too many nights without mercy. There was no softness left that had not been paid for, no innocence that had survived intact. And yet the woman in the mirror was not diminished, she was concentrated. I stepped closer and opened the small cosmetic case I had kept through everything. Inside, untouched for too long, lay the lipstick. The shade was deeper than red, almost arterial, almost obscene in its certainty. I twisted it up slowly and held it for a second before applying it. The first stroke transformed more than color. It drew a line between hesitation and intent. Across the upper lip, then the lower, precise. Slow, ritualistic. My hand did not shake this time. When I finished, the mouth staring back at me looked less made up than marked, as if I had painted a vow directly onto my skin. This mirror was no longer reflecting a woman preparing to be seen. It was reflecting a weapon being sharpened. I barely recognized myself. Not because I had become more beautiful, though there was something undeniably arresting in the effect. No, it was because beauty no longer explained what I was looking at. The girl who once measured herself by approval, by belonging, by the easy geometry of privilege, was gone. In her place stood someone composed of loss, discipline, rage, and choice. Someone defiant enough to wrap herself in crimson and call it strategy. Someone willing to walk into a predator's den without the protection of innocence, and without the luxury of pretending she could leave unchanged. I touched the edge of the mirror with 2 fingers, almost as if sealing something. Then I lowered my hand and looked directly into my own eyes. No prayer rose to my lips. I had none left for heaven. God had been absent from auction rooms and clinics and freezing apartments. He had not stood with me beneath the tower. He had not answered when I needed law, mercy, time. So I offered no plea upward. What I gave instead was lower, darker, more honest. A vow to myself, to the woman in the mirror and the ghost of the one she replaced. I will walk into that tower. I will not bend before him unless bending serves my purpose. I will not confuse fear with surrender. I will not forget what was taken from me, and I will not come back out the same. The room was silent when I finished, but it did not feel empty. It felt witness-bearing, almost reverent. I turned slightly, and the dress moved with me in a whisper of silk over skin, the sound so soft it might have been a secret. Tomorrow I would step into Arthur Vance's world carrying no legal leverage, no family fortune, no shield, except the one I had built tonight from memory, silk, and will. And as I stood there in crimson, in defiance, in the final stillness before descent, I understood with chilling clarity that some rituals do not prepare a woman to survive. They prepare her to be transformed by whatever dares to meet her on the other side. There are walks that feel like escapes. This was not one of them. This was a procession, a measured, deliberate movement towards something that had already begun claiming me long before I crossed its threshold. When I opened the door of that crumbling apartment building and stepped into the morning in the crimson dress, the city did not welcome me. It recoiled first, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if even Manhattan, that merciless cathedral of appetite and ambition, needed a second to understand what it was seeing. Behind me, stained walls, rusted mailboxes, the smell of old grease and damp concrete, the narrow stairwell that had echoed for weeks with the footsteps of a woman learning how poverty sounds when it becomes domestic. In front of me, wind, exhaust, movement, and the vast indifferent machinery of a city that devours weakness before breakfast and forgets names by noon. The contrast was almost obscene. Crimson silk emerging from rot. Elegance stepping over grime. The hem of my dress moved like spilled wine against a sidewalk lined with cigarette butts, rain-darkened trash, gum ground into old concrete, and puddles reflecting fractured bits of gray sky. For a moment, standing there on the curb, I felt less like a woman leaving home and more like a ghost from a ruined dynasty, who had put on the uniform of the dead before rejoining the living. The building behind me looked ashamed to release me. Or perhaps I was the one ashamed of how the dress transformed the street into something more honest, more brutal, by reminding me exactly how far I had fallen. Once, a car would have been waiting. Once, the route would have been arranged, the doors opened, the eyes lowered in respect. Now I stood alone in heels too elegant for the cracked pavement, feeling the winter air slide beneath the silk and touch my skin like a warning. People looked. Of course they did. Not the smooth, practiced glances of old society rooms where every observation is disguised as politeness. These were raw. A construction worker paused half a beat too long, confusion and desire tangled on his face. A woman walking a child tightened her grip on the small hand at her side and looked at me as though trying to solve a contradiction. Two young men across the street turned all the way around, laughter dying in their throats when they realized I was not what they first assumed. Their gaze traveled over the dress, over my mouth, over the posture I had dressed myself in as carefully as the silk, and I could almost hear the question they did not know how to frame. What is someone like her doing here? I had no answer they would understand. I hardly had one myself. I began to walk. Each step landed with more force than sound. My heels clicked against the pavement, crisp and controlled, and the rhythm became its own kind of metronome, steadying, punishing, inevitable. Don't look back. Don't touch the dress. Don't let your shoulders fold inward. Don't let your mouth betray the terror moving beneath the lipstick. I passed storefronts with metal shutters half raised, corner delis exhaling the smell of burned coffee and warm bread, delivery trucks idling with engines that sounded tired enough to die where they stood. Sirens wailed somewhere far downtown. Someone shouted from a window overhead. A bottle broke in an alley with a sound like a short, ugly truth. The city was loud in all the ways it always is, urgent, profane, relentless. But as I continued north, as the streets widened and the facades sharpened and the filth became more expensive, the noise began to alter. Not vanish. Refine itself. That was the thing about Manhattan. Money doesn't silence chaos, it edits it. The shouting gave way to clipped conversation spoken into discreet headsets. The sirens receded behind insulated glass and polished entrances. The smell of grease and thawing garbage surrendered, inch by inch, to perfume, cold stone, coffee roasted for people who never check prices. Even the wind changed. Downtown, it had felt feral, dirty, carrying fragments of every life it scraped against. Here it moved between the buildings like a blade passed through clean water, thin, sharp, controlled. By the time I reached the business district, the city no longer sounded alive. It sounded curated. And through all of it, beneath all of it, louder than traffic, louder than the memory of my own footsteps, there was my heartbeat. Count. 1 block. Another. Cross at the light. Do not rush. Do not stop. Again. Again. I counted everything because counting gave shape to fear. If I could break the journey into measurable units, maybe I could keep my mind from imagining the end of it too clearly. My heart answered every step with a harder beat, as if my body were trying to keep pace with something my soul had already reached. I thought of a lamb being led uphill toward an altar, the old sacrificial stories dressed in religion, so that violence could masquerade as order. But I was not innocent enough to be a lamb anymore. Too much had been carved away. Too much had already bled out of me in auction rooms, clinics, and sleepless nights. If I was climbing toward a den, I was climbing with open eyes. If I was being offered, then I would at least choose the angle of my own throat. The tower appeared before I was ready for it. Vance Tower did not rise so much as dominate. It broke free from the skyline with the calm cruelty of something certain of its own permanence. Glass, steel, reflection sharpened into doctrine. The building did not seem built by human ambition. It seemed built by the kind of arrogance that comes afterward, when a man has acquired enough power to stop asking whether he should, and start assuming he is a law unto himself. Standing at the base of it was like standing beneath a god-made architectural one of the old, pitiless gods, not those invented for comfort, but the ones that demanded tribute and did not explain themselves. The facade caught the pale daylight and gave nothing back except distance. Looking up at it was like trying to look directly into judgment. Arthur's altar. That was what it felt like. Not a corporate headquarters, not a destination. A place of offering. The glass doors loomed ahead, massive, dark, immaculate. So polished they ceased to resemble doors at all and became thresholds in the oldest, most mythic sense. Cross here and the rules change. Cross here and whatever you brought with you from the ordinary world becomes irrelevant. 2 security guards stood at either side, not stiff or theatrical, but still in that disciplined way that belongs to men trained not merely to watch but to intervene. Their suits fit like uniforms. Their expressions did not invite interpretation. Soldiers would have looked less prepared. I could feel their attention touch me before either one moved. Not lust, not curiosity. Assessment. Height, hands, posture, potential threat, allowed or denied. I hated how quickly I recognized the dynamic. Even here, before seeing Arthur Vance, I was already being processed by the machinery of his control. The revolving door gave a quiet mechanical sigh as I entered, and the city fell away behind me so abruptly it was almost obscene. 1 second there was wind, horns, shoes, engines, sirens, dragged thin by distance. The next, there was climate-controlled silence, marble, and the hushed acoustics of a place expensive enough to erase evidence of ordinary life. The lobby was vast without feeling open. That was the trick of it. Space used not for comfort, but for intimidation. Pale stone floors polished to a sterile sheen. Chrome surfaces reflecting clean lines and colder intentions. Reception desks that looked less like furniture and more like instruments. Every sound I made seemed too human for the room. The click of my heels, the faint shift of silk, the small betrayal of breath. Even the air smelled curated. Expensive lilies somewhere far away, chilled stone, and something ozonic, as if electricity itself had been refined for decorative use. I crossed the lobby feeling every eye that chose not to visibly look at me. Men in dark suits moved with the self-importance of people who had not yet realized they were merely gears. Women with sculpted hair and immaculate posture glided past carrying tablets in silence. I caught my reflection in a wall of black glass and nearly paused. The dress looked even darker here, richer, almost dangerous against all that sterile luxury. A wound moving through a temple. A stain no one could politely ignore. At the bank of elevators, a hostess too polished to be called a receptionist, too controlled to be anything less than another gatekeeper, confirmed my name with one glance, and one tiny flicker of recognition she buried almost instantly. Then she directed me to a private elevator with the same neutral grace a priest might use, while guiding a sacrifice to the correct staircase. The doors opened soundlessly. I stepped inside. And for one absurd second, I almost turned back. Because the elevator was not merely luxurious. It was intimate in the wrong way. Mirrors and polished chrome enclosed me on all sides, multiplying the crimson of my dress into a chamber full of red reflections. My own face looked back at me from 3 angles. Mouth painted like a vow, eyes darker than fear, spine held straight by force and habit. When the door sealed shut, the silence deepened into something nearly sacred. Then came the motion. Up. Smooth. Immediate. Unforgiving. The ascent pressed subtly against my body, enough to register in the stomach, then in the ears. A slight shift. A sealed sensation. Pressure building where sound should have been. Numbers lit one after another above the door, climbing with mechanical composure. 24, 31, 39, 46. I watched them rise the way condemned people must watch clocks, fascinated, helpless, aware that each increment is both tiny and absolute. There was no swaying, no jolt, no human imperfection in the lift. It moved with the kind of flawless certainty only immense money can purchase, and that somehow made it worse. A normal elevator might have rattled, reminded me that machines can fail. This one rose like fate. I touched nothing. I stood in the center as if any unnecessary movement might look like weakness to the mirrored walls. My reflection in the chrome was elongated, sharpened, half familiar. The red silk caught every cold surface and sent it back altered, transformed from dress into signal. Warning, offering, armor. I thought again of the lion's den, but dens are underground, carved into earth, hidden in shadow. This was its opposite, a predator enthroned above the city, so certain of his dominion that he built his lair in the sky and let everyone below look up in awe or dread. I was not descending into darkness. I was being carried upward into it. The pressure in my ears thickened slightly. I swallowed once, then again. My heartbeat kept count where the elevator no longer needed to. I realized with terrible clarity that this was the last stretch of anonymity I would have. By the time those doors opened, I would no longer be a woman on her way. I would be a woman arrived, delivered, presented. Whatever happened next would not belong to anticipation anymore. It would belong to consequence. The final numbers flashed. The movement slowed so gently it was almost merciful. Almost. I lifted my chin and watched my reflection do the same. Then the elevator came to a stop. And in the hush of that polished steel chamber, suspended between the city below and the monster above, I understood that I had finished climbing. The lamb had reached the altar. The door was about to open. And Arthur Vance was on the other side. The doors opened, not with a sound, but with a presence. The elevator released me into a space that did not resemble an office so much as a monument to dominance. The air itself felt different here, thinner, colder, filtered through systems designed not for comfort but for control. This was not where work happened. This was where outcomes were decided long before anyone else understood the game had begun. The hallway stretched before me like the nave of a cathedral, long, immaculate, silent to the point of suffocation. Black marble beneath my feet reflected distorted fragments of my figure, the crimson of my dress cutting through the darkness like a wound that refused to close. The walls were glass and shadow, broken only by subtle architectural lines that guided the eye forward, always forward, toward the end of the corridor. His door. The air carried scent here, not perfume, not decoration, but something curated and deliberate. Leather, aged wood. The faint, unmistakable trace of expensive scotch lingering in the atmosphere, as if power itself had a fragrance. Beneath it all, cold. Controlled cold. Every breath I took felt measured. Observed. I stepped forward. The sound of my heels striking the marble was immediate, sharp, precise, final. Each step echoed. Not loudly, but with enough clarity to feel like a countdown. 1, 2, 3. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me anymore. Only what waited ahead. My pulse had become something else entirely, no longer just a rhythm, but a force pressing against my ribs, demanding release, demanding resolution. Fear was there. Of course it was. Anyone who claims otherwise has never stood willingly at the threshold of something capable of consuming them whole. But it wasn't just fear. It was something darker, something far more dangerous. Because with every step, I felt it again. That pull, that recognition, that unspoken, unwanted awareness of the man waiting behind those doors. Predator, architect, destroyer. And somehow, something in me refused to see him only as an enemy. That terrified me more than anything else. The doors stood at the end of the hallway. Massive. Mahogany. Sealed. They did not invite entry. They demanded intention. I stopped in front of them. For a moment, the world held its breath. No movement. No sound. Only the quiet war inside my chest. This was it. The point of no return. I could still walk away. I could still turn around, step back into the elevator, disappear into whatever remained of my life. But I didn't move, because I already knew the truth. I had crossed that line long before I stepped into this building. I inhaled slowly, deep, controlled. Then I pushed the doors open. The sound was heavy, final. A deep, resonant thud that echoed behind me like something sealing shut. The office was vast, not cluttered, not excessive. Every element was intentional. Floor-to-ceiling glass stretched across the far wall, revealing the city below in a sea of cold blue light. From this height, Manhattan no longer looked alive. It looked owned, controlled, reduced. Shadows filled the space, broken only by the faint glow of recessed lighting and the distant shimmer of the skyline. The room felt less like a workspace and more like a throne room built for a man who did not need to prove his power, only exist within it. And then I saw him, Arthur Vance. Seated behind his desk, partially obscured by shadow, his figure defined more by absence of light than presence. The city behind him framed him in cold brilliance, turning him into a silhouette carved from control and inevitability. He didn't look up. Not immediately. As if my presence was already expected, already accounted for. The silence stretched, thick, oppressive, alive. I could hear the faint sound of liquid settling in glass, a movement of his hand, the quiet, deliberate placement of a whiskey glass against the surface of the desk. Even that felt controlled, measured. Nothing in this room happened by accident, not even silence. My body refused to move further, not out of fear, but because something instinctive understood that stepping closer meant entering his space, his territory, his control. And yet, I did not retreat, because I had not come this far to remain at the edge. Seconds passed, or minutes. I couldn't tell. Time felt irrelevant here, distorted, owned. Then, he moved, slowly, deliberately, his head lifting just enough for his gaze to find me. And when it did, the world narrowed, completely, because those eyes were exactly what I feared they would be. Not surprised, not curious, not even amused, just aware, deeply, dangerously aware, as if he had already calculated every possible outcome of this moment, and was simply waiting to see which one I would choose to fulfill. His gaze moved, not to my face, not immediately, but downward, to the dress, the crimson, the armor, the offering. He studied it, slowly, without hurry, without hesitation. And then he spoke. His voice was low, smooth, controlled, like velvet wrapped around steel. So, a pause, measured, intentional. You chose to come dressed for the negotiation, for the surrender. The words settled between us, heavy, irreversible. And in that moment, I understood. This was never going to be a meeting. This was a game. And I had just stepped onto the board. The story continues now. Get the Ruthless Vow on Amazon. The real fall begins when Isabella walks in.